Hi, I'm Brent Farris from the Bearded Man Studios, and I'm here to teach you artificial intelligence and player tracking. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's start off by creating a simple cube. So we'll create a cube, and let's set it at 0, 0, 0, just so we can keep track of things. So let's duplicate that cube, let's drag it out, let's squash it, let's make it tall, and let's make it long. So we have something that I like to call a wall. So let's drag this wall over here, and give or take, there we go, something like that. Alright, so let's promptly name this enemy. Let's name this wall, and let's create one more thing, and that will be a sphere. So let's create a sphere. Let's drag it behind the wall over here. Oh, let's put it over here behind the wall, and let's call that player, and let's set him to the player tag because this will be our player. So I'm not going to set up a player controller on this. I'm just going to drag the player around inside of the viewport. So that's just, I guess, a notice. But alright, let's create a new C# script inside of our project, and let's call it enemy, and let's open that sucker up. So let's clean this up a little bit. In fact, I don't think we need a start. Let's get rid of that. There we go, nice and clean. So in this, we're going to have the enemy look at the player, and only if he can see them, and only if they're in his line of sight. So we're going to create a line of sight, basically, and if the player enters it, the enemy is just going to stare at him. So let's start off by creating a few variables. Let's create a public bool, and let's call it cPlayer, and let's set it to false. Then let's make a public game object and call it player, and set that to null. We'll assign it instead of the inspector, and then let's create a third variable, float, and it's going to be called turn speed. So excuse me, our player is going to turn back and forth to indicate that he doesn't see the player, and when he sees him, he's going to lock onto him. So that's what the turn speed is for. So let's go ahead and jump down inside of our update function, and let's begin. So let's begin by making him rotate when he doesn't see the player. So let's say if not see player, we want to do a transform dot rotate, no, not rotation, dot rotate. And we want to rotate him by 0 turn speed and 0. And we have to reset our turn speed whenever he reaches his max turn. Let's create another variable. Let's just call it public float max turn is equal to 45. So 45 degrees is going to be his max turn. So we create this elaborate if statement now. We say if the, let's open up a second one because this is going to be nested checks. So if the transform.rotation.EulerAngles.y is greater than the max turn, then, well, not then, sorry, and the transform.rotation.EulerAngles.y is less than 180, that's just an arbitrary number, nothing important there. And then we want to say or, because this is if he's turning one direction. Now we need to check if he turns the other. So or the transform.rotation.EulerAngles.y is less than, let's say, 360 subtracted by max turn, and transform.rotation.EulerAngles.y is greater than 180. So if those pass, we want to simply invert our turn speed. So turn speed is times equals -1. So now it's inverted. So if we do not, if we do see the player, we want to just do a simple transform.lookAt, and we want to look at player.transform. So there we go. If we don't see the player, we're just going to look back and forth forever, And if we do, we're going to do a transform look at, and we're going to look at the player until he goes out of sight again. So let's create a vector 3. This next part, we're going to create his line of sight, basically this kind of cone-ish angle that he can see. We'll call it sight. And we're going to set that equal to the player.transform.position subtracted by the transform.position. And we're going to do a float and call it dist for distance, or not, sorry, not dist. Let's call it dot because we're going to do a dot product. And set that equal to vector3 dot sight. And then the second one, do the transform dot right. So the right vector of the this enemy. So here's where we do the check to see if he's inside the cone. If the dot is less than 3.5, that's an arbitrary number that I'm going to put up here. Public float LOS, or line of sight, is equal to 3.5f. So now we can make this line of sight and dot is greater than negative line of sight. So the opposite side. So this would be positive 3.5, this would be negative 3.5. So if that is all true, we can now do our raycast. So let's do a raycast hit, and then we'll do if physics.raycast transform.position, and let's take in the player.transform.position subtracted by the transform.position. So our destination location subtracted by our current location, and we're going to normalize that. We'll get our direction towards that player. So this is basically going to cast out a ray towards the player from the enemy all the time, just 100% of the time. And let's create a public float max sight, and let's set that equal to something like 8. This will be as far as the enemy can see. So max sight. So if that is true, then we want to say if the hit.collider.name is equal to player, because remember we named our player. We're going to say C player is equal to true. Otherwise, C player is equal to false. And if this raycast failed and hit nothing, so else C player is equal to false. So there you go, we have it nice and set up. Let's go ahead and debug and see if we have any errors. So jump back over to Unity, and let's just go ahead and hit play and figure it out. Sorry about that, I was double checking my notes. So let's hit play. Nothing happens because we need to attach our script to our enemy here. So hit play. You can see our enemy is looking back and forth. Here's an error. We forgot to assign our player to our enemy. So let's drag our player from our hierarchy into the player game object of our enemy. Now let's hit play. Error goes away. Our enemy is looking back and forth. Let's peep our little player out from the wall. He sees us. Right? He's looking right at us. He's constantly looking. Go back behind the wall, he's lost us. Now if I come through the wall when he's looking the other way, he's not going to see us. Oh, there he does. So you can see that he didn't see us until he started to rotate back. Sorry about that. Let's move it further this way and wait till he turns. He turns that way, we come out. There we go. So he doesn't see us until we come in his line of sight, which you saw didn't happen until he started to turn back. So there we go. We have some simple checks. Now he's just going to stare at us no matter where we go until we go behind the wall. Or if we go too far out of sight. See, we're way up here, but he just can't see. So that was some simple AI on getting a line of sight for an enemy, so he can stare at your player, and you can do awesome stuff with that. I hope you enjoyed it, and we're done.